Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call this Village Board meeting to order on Monday, July 15, 2019, and ask if you would please rise and join the Village Board in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Would the clerk please call a roll?
Trustee Baldino.
Here.
Trustee Scaletta.
Here.
Trustee Canty.
Here.
Trustee Rosenberg.
Here.
Trustee LaBedz.
Here.
Trustee Schwingbeck.
Here.
Trustee Tinaglia.
Here.
Trustee Padovani.
Here.
President Hayes.
Here. First item on the agenda is the approval of minutes. We've got 3 sets to approve tonight. The first is from our Committee of the Whole meeting from June 17, 2019. Any changes or passes?
Pass.
Passed by Trustee Rosenberg.
Move approval.
Second.
Motion to approve by Trustee Tinaglia, seconded by Trustee LaBedz. Any questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Next, the Village Board meeting minutes from the same evening, June 17, 2019. Changes or passes?
Pass.
Passed by Trustee Rosenberg.
Move to approve. Second.
Motion to approve by Trustee Schwingbeck, seconded by Trustee Baldino. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And finally, the minutes from the Committee of the Whole meeting from June 24, 2019. Any changes or passes?
Pass.
Pass.
Passed by Trustee Canty and Trustee Rosenberg.
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion to approve by Trustee Padovani, seconded by Trustee LaBedz. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, we then move on to the approval of the accounts payable. We've got 2 warrant registers to approve tonight, and I call on Trustee Rosenberg.
Thank you, Mayor. I would move approval of the warrant register with a check date of June 30th, 2019 in the amount of $1,331,911.34.
Second.
Motion by Trustee Rosenberg, seconded by Trustee Scaletta. Any questions or comments from the board? Anything from the audience? Seeing none, roll call.
Trustee Rosenberg.
Yes.
Trustee Scaletta.
Yes.
Trustee Tinaglia.
Yes.
Trustee Schwingbeck.
Yes.
Trustee Padovani.
Yes.
Trustee Baldino.
Yes.
Trustee Canty.
Yes.
Trustee LaBedz.
Yes.
President Hayes.
Yes. And Trustee Rosenberg, the second one.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd move approval of the warrant register with a check date of July 15th, 2019 in the amount of $2,575,973.86.
Second.
A motion by Trustee Rosenberg, seconded by Trustee Scaletta. Any questions or comments from the board? Anything from the audience? Seeing none, roll call.
Trustee Rosenberg.
Yes.
Trustee Scaletta.
Yes.
Trustee Baldino.
Yes.
Trustee LaBedz.
Yes.
Trustee Canty.
Yes.
Trustee Padovani.
Yes.
Trustee Tinaglia.
Yes.
Trustee Schwingbeck.
Yes.
President Hayes.
Yes. There being no recognitions or presentations tonight, we'll move on to public hearings. And we do have a public hearing tonight to conduct on the substantial amendments to the 2015-2019 Consolidated Plan and draft 2019 Annual Action Plan. So could I have a motion to open the public hearing?
So moved. Second.
By Trustee Baldino, seconded by Trustee Scaletta. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? So the public hearing is open, and I turn it over to Mr. Recklaus.
Thank you, Mayor. This is the second of 2 public hearings on this matter, the first of which took place on June 10th. The purpose of this hearing is to receive final comments on the proposed substantial amendments to the 2015 to 2019 Consolidated Plan and the draft 2019 Annual Action Plan. I'm going to let Mr. Perkins go into details here.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. As mentioned, the first public hearing was on June 10th. The plan and documents were then made available for public comment for the required 30-day public comment period. We did receive 6 public comments. 4 of those were relative to one of the agencies for their funding requests that I'll discuss in a moment. Later on in the agenda, there is the recommendation for these items to be approved by the board, and then they would be submitted to the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, and they would then conduct their review before approving the village's funding allocation for the next fiscal year. So the substantial amendments, these were discussed at the June 10th meeting. This is a quick summary of those. I won't go through each of them, but be happy to answer any questions. The annual action plan that is our one-year plan also includes the federal fiscal year budget that begins October 1st of this year through September 30th of 2020. We have an annual budget estimated of around $500,000. At the last public hearing, each of the agencies that submitted requests were heard, as well as any other members of the public, and then staff made the recommendation for the funding allocation, which is on the right-hand side. During that first meeting, we talked about the various limitations and caps that we can fund within, and the top 13 items are the public service activities, and the goal has been to try to continue funding those agencies without extending more agencies to try to comply with HUD direction, where they would like us to have fewer public services agencies that we fund for slightly larger amounts. So the 4 public comment requests that we did receive were for requests to fund Northwest Campus, which was not recommended by staff for a couple of reasons. One being they've gone through a number of reorganizations over the past year, and also some of their services are also provided by journeys that the village also funds. However, should the board wish to fund Northwest Campus, some money could be reduced from the Children at Play program. That could be reduced by about $3,000 to fund Northwest Campus if the board would choose to do so. And then additional money would have to be funded in the village's budget for that difference. So at this point, the purpose of this hearing is to receive additional public comment for the board to discuss any items within the plan, and then to close the public hearing, and then later on in the agenda would be the recommendation for approval.
Okay,
I'll be happy to answer any questions, and Nora Boyer is here as well.
All right, thank you, Mr. Perkins. Any questions from the board before I go to the audience? All right, let me go to the audience just to see if there's anyone who wants to address the board under the public hearing for the substantial amendments. Seeing none. Let me come back to the board then for further discussion or comment. Seeing none. Trustee Rosenberg.
Charles, could you elaborate? In their information, they indicated that they expected to benefit 330 people. Is that not correct as far as, so with the monies that we may allocate, wouldn't that make sense to do something toward their way based upon that?
You're referring to Trustee Rosenberg, Northwest Campus?
Yes. Or am I looking at the wrong?
Yes, I'd ask Nora Boyer to discuss specifically their proposal. As I mentioned, there have been some turnover in their executive staffing and on their board, but that certainly is a prerogative of the board to allocate some funds to Northwest Campus. We would want to have a discussion with them on setting up and how their services are provided, making sure that they are to Arlington Heights residents and they're not duplicating services that are provided by both the village's health department and by Journeys. So we'd need to have that discussion before moving forward. But Nora, could you comment on the number of persons that they're projecting to assist?
I can't comment specifically on the number that they're suggesting, but that is something we discussed prior to entering into a grant agreement, making sure that we're on the same page with respect to eligibility and number of people that we would expect they would serve for the amount of dollars provided.
Is there any way we could allocate funds that we have in other areas maybe to guide toward what they're using it for, housing or something like that?
If I could,
Mr. Eckloff.
if I could jump in, Trustee Rosenberg, I was
Sure.
just going to say that, some of this is we really can't verify the 330 number. Sometimes there's a difference in what one group uses to establish a residency versus what the village uses to establish residency. The other thing I'll just point out is, by rules, we can only allocate $44,500 towards public services, and we've received $194,000 in requests. And so, necessarily there will always be winners and losers in these these programs, unfortunately. And in this particular case, staff recommend the ones that we thought best fit our goals and needs. But we certainly, as Mr. Perkins indicated, we certainly can make adjustments. We would have to continue to work with them a little bit on refining their information.
Okay, thank you.
Well, just to follow up on that, my concern would be if we did fund Northwest Compass out of CDBG funds, Mr. Perkins has indicated we'd have to make up that difference from the general fund. Is that right?
If we, the suggestion I had was to reduce the Children at Play program, which the village has cooperated with the Arlington Heights Park District and the School District 25. So to make up that allocation, the remainder would have to be in the general fund. Yes, that's
Right.
correct.
And so that's my only concern. No comment on the validity of the request for Northwest Compass, but traditionally these CDBG funds are funds that are allocated to us that we don't have to use general funds for. And so I would be concerned that we would have to dip in, as a result of this reallocation, we would have to dip into the general fund dollars. So I would be opposed to it. Anybody else? Trustee Scaletta.
I would agree with you, Mayor. I want to say it was back in like 2009, 2010, when the budget was significantly reduced. At that point, we started using general fund dollars for the Children at Play program, which is basically a scholarship program for after-school care provided by the Park District at the local schools. And if I'm not mistaken, right now we're funding over $30,000. And anytime we reduce the amount of this grant to redistribute it, we are going to have to make up those dollars through the general fund. So I concur with you, Mayor.
Okay. Anybody else on that? Okay. Next, since we have no other public comment, close the public hearing.
That's correct.
All right, we need a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved.
Trustee Scaletta, seconded by Trustee Padovani. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Can we take up the item to approve now in the agenda? Can we move that forward?
Sure.
Any
Amend the
objection?
agenda. Sure.
Okay, I just need a motion then to take up this item, which is currently under the agenda, under report of the village manager, to this point in the agenda. Can I have such a motion?
Can I ask a question, Mr.
Sure,
Mr. Mayor?
Trustee Scaletta.
When we get to that point in the agenda, would someone be allowed to ask a question at that point? The only reason I ask is that if somebody did not make it for the beginning of the meeting and saw that it was a lengthy agenda and we moved it up.
Okay. Is there anyone here from Northwest Compass or any other affected agency that might want to comment on this? I don't see anybody, but it's a good point.
I would just leave. I'd prefer to
Okay,
leave it.
let's just leave it,
Thank
since
you.
there's no one here that has to wait.
Correct.
Yeah, okay.
Okay.
Okay, so we'll leave that until the report of the village manager. So we've closed the public hearing, and there are no other public hearings, so let's move on to citizens to be heard. And we do have 3 blue cards from individuals who want to address the board on items not on the agenda. And so you're just reminded of the 3-minute time limit, and the first is Melissa Kayer.
Hello, I retrieved my property tax bill from the Cook County Treasurer's website. That it's due August 1st, 2019, and also down with single-use plastic water bottles, and you have delicious water in Arlington Heights.
All right, thank you, Melissa. And next is Frank Biga. Welcome, Frank.
Thank you, Mayor. I come today to discuss very briefly the water bill. I know I emailed all of you about a year ago. We had the additional tax for the stormwater utility, and I'm not necessarily against the tax itself. I think we need the money, but I think it can be apportioned differently or taxed differently on a per usage basis rather than a $75 flat fee essentially for every meter every single year. It's basically $625 per month, and like for me, I only use 4,000 gallons of every 2-month period. So my water consumption was $25.56. Then there's the service charge and the sewer consumption. And the stormwater utility was $12.50, so my total bill was $49.86. So basically half of my water bill is taxes, yet I only used 4,000 gallons during that time frame. So I think that it's something the board should consider, basically putting this tax burden on water usage rather than per individual meter. Because I think that with all the other taxes that we're facing now, especially given the increase in the license fee and the license plates, the gas tax, all this adds up, another $75 for every single homeowner every single year. And I question, is this going to be a permanent thing? I know that in the past, the sewers and the storm utility wasn't necessarily funded to enough a level to meet our needs as a village. But I think we should do it more on a water usage basis. And I know I've written some of you, Trustee LaBedz, during the campaign. I had emailed you regarding this, and I appreciated your comments on that. But it's something that I think you should consider, because it's very regressive the way that it is right now. It'll affect somebody who doesn't use much. It'll affect our poor residents a lot more than it would other people. And there are businesses that will use a lot more water that put more of that tax the storm utility and the drainage and the issues that this tax is meant to address a lot more than I would. So it's something that I think you should consider over the next year, into your next fiscal year when you plan. Just use a different mechanism to do it. And I know a lot of other members who would appreciate that. So.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Biga. Mr. Ecklos, do you have any comments on that?
Sure. To be just for the sake of everyone else in the room and for folks at home, what we're referring to is the new fee, stormwater maintenance fee that's been placed on the water bill. And that's the funding source for the large number of stormwater improvements that we're seeing throughout the community currently. The stormwater fee, that's addressing our stormwater system. And that's completely separate from water usage, because that's used to maintain the system that manages stormwater, not wastewater, not water that you're using. And so someone could have, use virtually no water, but they still the argument behind our system is they still have to pay their share to pay for stormwater improvements, because we found that our stormwater system in our community was not up to the standards that we want it to be. And so that's why we didn't do it based on water usage, because someone who happens to use a lot of water, perhaps they have a large family or a lot of children, they aren't necessarily causing more of the problem with our stormwater system than someone who uses no water. And that's why there is not a correlation between the two.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Ecklos. All right. If no other comments on that, I've got one other blue card, Peg Lane. Peg?
If you could use the microphone for the folks.
All right. This is an agenda item on Sigwald 16 or what? Okay. All right. We'll change that to Sigwald 16. So I have no other blue cards for, why don't you come forward? And just give us your name.
My name is Robert Schmidt, and the issue that I want to present to you is shopping carts. I noticed that's a real problem in Arlington Heights. I mean, I realize there's bigger problems in the world, but it's an issue. And I see them gathering kitty corner to Mariano's. I see them in bunches near Dutton's. People just think that because they live next to or close to a store that they can use it as their own personal shopping cart. And if you go to the properties themselves, they actually have signs that say ordinance, that has like an ordinance that says do not remove shopping cart from the property. And if you talk to an officer, they'll actually tell you there is no ordinance. And all they'll tell you is that they can just arrest somebody with theft of a shopping cart. But I know something needs to be done about this. And if we had something set up like Aldi does, like this wouldn't be an issue at all. So I was wondering if there would be a way that some sort of ordinance could be proposed to like solve this problem. I guess, is my first question regarding
Okay,
shopping carts.
why don't you go on to your second question?
And my second question is, I've been always curious as to why, when we do road construction, why is it that I just want some sort of an explanation. Why is it that when we do road construction, we only do like a 2-foot area in front of the curves of the road? And it seems to me that, like, when it comes to the smaller roads, that we only seem to do the entire road when we have curb work on both sides. I was just wondering for an explanation on that as
I
well.
think we can get a quick explanation from Mr. Paperniak.
Yes.
Yeah, that's considering our edge grinding program where we'll do a 4-foot width on either side of the roadway. The majority of the damage done is done by garbage trucks and heavy loads, so that happens just to the edge. It's also where we're most susceptible. We have to get that water into the gutter, and then we can keep it. Water and asphalt don't mix, so we found that instead of doing hot mix small patches all over, we become more efficient by doing long strips, and we call that edge
Oh,
grind.
I see. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
And we'll look at the grocery cart issue.
My other question was,
You've got 15 seconds.
okay, when it comes to like grants and things like that for like parks and stuff like that, what does one have to do to, if a group of people were to get like a grant to like redo a park, what are the procedures that you have to go to revamp a park, I guess is what I'm asking.
Well, most of our parks in the village of Arlington Heights are owned and operated by the park district, so you'd probably have, if you've got a specific park in mind, you should find out who the owner is and then contact that board. It's most likely the park district. I
Okay.
hate to pass the buck, but that's probably the case.
Okay. All right. But yeah, I was just wondering about my main thing was about the shopping carts
Okay.
today.
We can look at that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else in the audience that wishes to address the board on an item not on the agenda? All right, seeing none, we'll move on then to old business, and we do have a number of items to report out tonight. The first is from our committee of the whole meeting on June 24, 2019, regarding the operating fund overview and recommended budget ceilings. Mr. Reckles, do you want to, or Mr. Keeney, just give us a elevator speech on what this is all about? Yes, I will. It's the operating overview. Yeah, get right into that microphone.
No.
Try this one.
There you go.
Okay. The operating overview is really one of the first steps of the annual budget process that we do. And we're looking at the next year now, 2020 already. We make some estimates in terms of the revenues and expenditures for the general fund as well as revenues and expenses for the water fund. Those are our two main operating funds. And we also come up with an estimated property tax levy at this time, but none of this is finalized until we do a lot more detailed work. That'll happen with the budget meetings in November of each year. So this was just the board's first look at the direction that we're going and some initial estimates that we have.
All right, thanks, Mr. Keeney. And we did have a motion by Trustee Padovani, and I call on him at this time.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to respectfully move that the board agree or approve the committee of the whole recommendation that the 2020 budget ceiling of $79,018,000 for the general fund and $20,431,900 for the water and sewer fund be approved.
Second.
Motion by Trustee Padovani, seconded by Trustee Schwingbeck. Questions or comments from the board? Seeing none, we have one blue card on this, Mr. Moons.
Thank you, President Hayes, trustees, everyone, thank you. On the village tax increase for next year, I understand we've only had about 6 months until the current budget expires, so I would earnestly ask that you please do everything possible to reduce that 2020 tax levy. You expect to increase taxes next year to 0% if you can by November committee of the whole meetings. The way I understand it is that you're estimating in that budget ceiling 1.97% tax levy increase, which is about $727,953. That's what that 1.97% 7 increase. I think this could be substantially reduced if the village would dip into the massive reserves that are in the general fund right now. By my estimate, the minimum requirement of 25% of the total expenses and the current 40% of the total expenses is to be about 11.5 million, the difference between that two. So I understand that the bond market loves those excessive reserves, and for all the worries that are out there, I trust your projections. You've always done a really good job on the projections, but it seems to be a little bit overly conservative to have such an enormous excess in the general fund when we're looking at a tax levy increase to this amount. Even Mr. Bren of Lauderbeck and Amon said that we're on the upper end of the rule of thumb for excess reserves in the general fund. So in my opinion, I don't think it's going to hurt all that much, that if you could take $727,000 out of that 11 million to reduce it to zero, or at least take a part of that to help subsidize to reduce that tax levy somewhat. We've got a lot of money there. This story, it kind of reminds me of the story of a relative that I have that has millions of dollars in equity, but he continues to come back to me and ask for $20 every weekend. So I think we've got a lot of excess there. We can help subsidize that levy. If you've all received your letter from the Cook County Assessor's Office this last couple weeks, I think many residents could use a tax break from the village. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Moons. All right, no other comments from the audience on this agenda item. We have a motion and a second. We need a roll call on this. Roll call.
Trustee Padovani?
Yes.
Trustee Schwingbeck?
Yes.
Trustee Rosenberg?
Yes.
Trustee LaBedz?
Yes.
Trustee Baldino?
Yes.
Trustee Canty?
Yes.
Trustee Tinaglia?
Yes.
Trustee Scaletta?
Yes.
President Hayes?
Yes. We move on then to the report of the committee of the whole meeting from July 8, 2019, and I call on Trustee Scaletta.
Thank you, Mayor. I would move now, as I did that evening, to recommend that the Committee of the Whole recommend to the Village Board that staff be directed to prepare an ordinance prohibiting sweepstakes machines in the village.
Second.
Motion by Trustee Scaletta, second by Trustee Baldino. Any questions or comments from the board? Anything from the audience? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Next, we move on to the report of the Committee of the Whole meeting from this evening, July 15, 2019. And I'd first call on Trustee Tinaglia.
Thanks, Mayor. I'd like to move now, as I did earlier this evening, to recommend that the Village Board of Trustees recommend to the Liquor Commissioner the issuance of a Class E liquor license to M&B Alba Corp., doing business as Barnaby's Family Inn, located at 933 West Rand Road, upon surrender of the current liquor license issued to that location.
Second.
Motion by Trustee Tinaglia, seconded by Trustee Baldino. Further questions or comments from the board? Anything from the audience? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Well, congratulations, gentlemen, and thank you for your loyalty to the Village of Arlington Heights. A great business that's been open since 1969 in Arlington Heights, is that right? So keep up the great work. All right, thank you.
Good luck.
And a further report from this evening, we have three appointments to our boards and commissions in the village, and so I'd first call on Trustee Baldino.
Thank you, Mayor. I would like to move, as I did earlier this evening, to concur with the mayor's appointment of Alia Patel to the Youth Commission, term ending April 30th, 2020.
Second.
Motion by Trustee Baldino, seconded by Trustee Padovani. Any questions or comments from the board? Anything from the audience? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Aliyah, would you come forward? Where are you at? There you go. Come forward to the podium if you would. And just raise your right hand and repeat after me. I, and state your full name.
I, Alia Patel,
Having been appointed to the Youth Commission
having been appointed to the Youth Commission
in the Village of Arlington Heights
in the Village of Arlington Heights
in the County of Cook,
in the County of Cook,
do solemnly swear and affirm
I solemnly swear and affirm
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of Illinois,
and the Constitution of the State of Illinois,
and that I will faithfully discharge the duties
and I will faithfully discharge the duties
of the office according to the best of my ability.
of the office according to the best of my abilities.
Congratulations. We know you will. Need need you to sign this in front of the clerk, but I also need to present you with a village logo pin, which all of the elected and appointed board members in the village wear as a representative of this community. So wear it proudly, and we look forward to working with you. Congratulations.
Congratulations.
And next, for the next appointment, I would call on Trustee Scaletta.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would move now, as I did earlier this evening, to concur in the mayor's appointment of Carrie Stanley to the Special Events Commission with the term ending April 30th, 2023.
Second.
Motion by Trustee Scaletta, seconded by Trustee Canty. Any questions or comments from the board or the audience? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, Carrie, if you come forward. And the same drill. I, and state your full name.
I, Carrie Stanley,
Having been appointed to the Special Events Commission
having been appointed to the Special Events Committee
in the Village of Arlington Heights,
in the Village of Arlington Heights,
the County of Cook,
in the County of Cook,
do solemnly swear and affirm
do solemnly swear and affirm
that I will support the Constitution of the United States,
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
the Constitution of the State of Illinois,
and the Constitution of the State of Illinois,
and that I will faithfully discharge the duties
and I will faithfully discharge the duties
of the office according to the best of my abilities.
of the office to the best of my ability.
Good enough. Thank you. Congratulations. Sign that in front of our village clerk, and a logo pin for you as well. So congratulations.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
And one more appointment, and I call on Trustee Scaletta.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would move now, as I did earlier this evening, to concur in the mayor's appointment of William Falk to the Police Pension Fund with a term ending April 30th, 2021.
Second.
Motion by Trustee Scaletta, seconded by Trustee Tinaglia. Any questions or comments from the board or from the audience? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Bill, if you come forward. Aye, and state your full name.
I, William Falk,
Having been appointed to the Police Pension Board
having been appointed to the Police Pension Board
in the Village of Arlington Heights,
in the Village of Arlington Heights,
the County of Cook,
in the County of Cook,
do solemnly swear and affirm
do solemnly swear and affirm
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
that I will support the Constitution of the United
and
States
the Constitution of the State of Illinois,
and the Constitution of the State of Illinois,
and that I will faithfully discharge the duties
and that I will faithfully discharge the duties
of the office according to the best of my ability.
of the office according to the best of my abilities.
Congratulations, Bill. Same for you, and here's your logo pin, so wear it proudly. Congratulations.
Congratulations.
Well, we do have still some vacancies on our boards and commissions, and so if there's any residents who are interested in serving on one of our appointed boards or commissions, you can take a look at our website to see what the commissions are all about, what their purposes are, and who some of the current members are, and their meeting times, and see if it might fit into your schedules. And if you are interested, contact me directly or any member of the village board or our village administration. And all you need to do is send in a resume, and we'd be happy to talk to you about the opportunities. So thank you. We have no other old business, so we'll move on to the consent agenda. Are there any members of the board who wish to remove an item on the consent agenda? Seeing none, any members of the board who wish, or any members of the audience who wish to remove an item on the consent agenda? Seeing none, are there any members of the board who wish to vote no or pass on any item on the consent agenda? Seeing none, I'd entertain a motion to approve.
I'd move approval of the consent agenda.
Second.
By Trustee LaBedz, seconded by Trustee Tinaglia. Any questions or comments from the board or the audience? Seeing none, roll call.
Trustee LaBedz?
Yes.
Trustee Tinaglia?
Yes.
Trustee Rosenberg?
Yes.
Trustee Schwingbeck?
Yes.
Trustee Padovani?
Yes.
Trustee Scaletta?
Yes.
Trustee Baldino?
Yes.
Trustee Canty?
Yes.
President Hayes?
Yes. Well, we move on then to new business, and we do have 4 items to address tonight. The first is a final plat of subdivision for 1400 West Thomas Street. Is the petitioner present for that? Why don't you come forward and just identify yourself if you would?
I'm Marcy Glickert.
Welcome back. And so this is pretty straightforward. Any comments from the staff?
Mayor and board members, this comes to you from the Plan Commission with a positive recommendation. Everything's in order for the approval of the final plat.
Okay. Any questions from the board? Trustee Tinaglia.
I'd like to move approval.
Second.
Very good. Thank you. By Trustee Tinaglia, seconded by Trustee Baldino. Any questions or comments from the board or from the audience? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Well, good luck to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
All right. Next on the agenda under new business is Dogtopia. It's a special use permit request and variations for the property located on East Rand Road. And the petitioner is present. And if you just identify yourself, please.
Hi, my name is Chris Barnes.
Okay, Chris. And why don't you tell us what you're looking to do here?
So I'm looking for a special use permit and 2 variances for Dogtopia. It's a 5,600 square foot user at the corner of Random Palatine and South Point Shopping Center. It's a doggy daycare predominantly with some boarding, a little bit of retail, and some salon and ancillary services.
Okay. Questions from the board? Trustee Rosenberg.
Thank you, Mayor.
Actually, Trustee Rosenberg, let me go to the staff before I
Sure.
come back to you. Mr. Perkins, did you have anything to add?
Just happy to answer questions. It does come before you with a positive recommendation from staff and the Plan Commission. We feel this will be a good use to bring additional activity at South Point Shopping Center, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Trustee Rosenberg.
Thank you, Mayor. So, Charles, directly to the east, there are single-family homes. What is the approximate distance between this location and those homes? Any idea?
They are set back a fair distance away. I've got an aerial on this presentation I can show you. We do have a similar daycare just south of Village Hall here that is immediately adjacent to a single-family neighborhood on Belmont. And in consultation with Building and Health, we've had no complaints in the last 5 years. This particular petitioner is proposing sound attenuation as part of their construction and build out of the space. You can see the area here highlighted in red. It's kind of set back from the residential. There's also the detention basin behind the main box retail space. In fact, the right at the north portion in this area is the Care Animal Hospital. They have kennels that are closer to the homes here than this particular daycare would be. So we don't foresee that there would be a noise issue that would emanate to those neighbors.
I was just curious because of Mr. Barnes indicated, I think there was going to be a higher volume of pets that he was going to have there, and with the outside yard that they were proposing in the back, as far as I didn't know what kind of noise that would be generating as far as for the residents behind, but it doesn't look like based on this map that there are any residents that are that close of a proximity, so I don't think it should be an issue. That was the only question I had.
Okay. Any other questions for the board? Trustee LaBedz.
Thank you, Mayor Hayes. I also have sort of it's a noise-related question, but it doesn't have anything to do with the dogs. You mentioned in the materials that you have a very high-quality HVAC system to help, remove odors and keep, the temperature uniform and so on and so forth. So it's really more of a comment, and maybe given based on the aerial, it might not be a big issue, but I would just be sure that wherever the location of the units are won't carry sound into the nearby residents, because I've had in the past some complaints, not about a particular doggy place or anything, something of the sound of HVAC carrying into a quiet neighborhood. So that's just it's really a comment. So for you to keep in mind.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. Otherwise, I am in favor of this, even though I don't have any dogs.
Okay. Trustee Scaletta.
Thank you, Mayor. Charles, I'm looking at the aerial that we were provided in our packet, it looks very, very similar to what you're showing, but is the fenced-off area behind the buildings?
The fenced area for the outdoor area is just to the east of this retail building, and I do have another exhibit. So it's in this general area here. There's a gap between the two buildings. It goes to kind of another surface parking area and loading zone at the back of the retail.
Right.
So the small outdoor area will be in this area. And I do want to point out that is a little different than the Care Animal Hospital that I referenced earlier. They don't have an outdoor play area. It's more a veterinary and overnight kennel. So this would be a little bit different from that.
Okay. So, and there's no retail in the building to the south?
The building to the south, this is the Biff furniture store that's been in this building, and we are in discussions, on potential future tenants in there as well. There's a real estate brokerage firm down in this portion of the shopping center.
Okay. I don't want to start any rumors, but is Biff the one that's always going out of business or no?
They have had a lot of going out of business sales, yes.
Okay. I thought I remembered seeing that. That's why I thought maybe it was vacant. Okay. So what type of fence are you looking to install? I know it's going to be a little bit taller than normal, so what type of fence are we going to see?
Yeah, so we are proposing an 8-foot tall fence for privacy. It is going to be a vinyl-based material, maintenance-free. Provided 3 exhibits to the board of possible materials. My landlord is actually here today, so we're going to work on something that complements the plaza, but also provides what we needed to provide for us.
Excellent.
It'll be a vinyl-based, maintenance-free.
Great. No, that's exactly what I want to hear is that, you're in a retail shopping center, and to just put up a fence that seems out of place wouldn't be beneficial to adding retail. So, thank you.
Okay. Anybody else on the board? Seeing none, anyone in? Trustee Rosenberg.
I'd move approval of the Dogtopia PC 19-004 with the variations required and the recommendation by the Plan Commission provided for the 5 conditions as provided.
Second.
Okay, motion by Trustee Rosenberg, second by Trustee LaBedz. Anything further from the board? Anything from the audience on this agenda item? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Well, congratulations to you. This is, I think, going to be a good addition. We're very glad to fill a vacant space. So thank you and welcome to Arlington Heights.
Thank you very much.
All right. And next on the agenda is Sigwald 16. Proposal for plan unit development and rezoning from R3 to R7, subdivision and associated variations. And I know that to be located on Chestnut and Highland in downtown Arlington Heights. And we've got a team here tonight. And so if you just introduce yourselves, if you would.
Good evening, Mark McLaughlin, Taylor Morrison, along with Mike Frissell, our attorney on the project, Mark Hopkins, HCAM, our architect, along with Edie Richard. And there's also some more team members back there, but hopefully we won't need them. So again, Mark McLaughlin, a little bit about Taylor Morrison. Am I diving in or is there a staff?
No, why don't you go ahead and then we'll go to the staff afterwards.
Okay, cool.
You're good.
A little bit about Taylor Morrison. We're the 5th largest home builder in the United States. We operate in 17 markets in 9 states. The Chicago division, we're projected to close 110 homes this year. We have 11 active communities, Hawthorne Woods, Lake Barrington, Lincolnshire. And then we also have 10 communities in planning, Barrington, Libertyville, and Rolling Meadows. Taylor Morrison is also America's most trusted home builder, according to Life Story Research for the last 4 years in a row. Which brings me then to this project, Sigwald 16. So we've been through the entire development process coming up to you. We started in January. Staff Development Committee gave us some support. We did the Preliminary Design Commission, Concept Plan Review Committee. Both of those gave us vocal support. We hosted a neighborhood meeting in April. We also had vocal support from the members of the community that came out to that. We did Design Commission, Housing Commission, Plan Commission, and We went undefeated in those votes. Which brings us to today. I'm going to turn it over to Mike Fursell for a quick project overview, talk a little bit of the details of what relief we're asking for.
Thank you.
Good evening. First, my apologies to the board. I had an outdoor meeting that ran late, so I didn't have a chance to go home and dress up. My apologies.
You're fine.
Thank you. Thank you. So this project is incredibly creative. It is 16 for sale, fee simple row homes. The parcel you are all, I'm sure, very, very familiar with. It's just less than 1 acre, and it's the southern quarter of lot block 425, consisting of 6 R3 residential lots. We are looking to rezone this R7, which is consistent with the downtown master plan, with into a PUD, which will have 18 lots, 16 of which will be each residence and 2 outlots, being in the front or on the Sigwalt side, and of course in the rear court where the main entrance to the parking garages and the guest parking will be. There will be a homeowner's declaration of which each homeowner will be a part, which will run with the land. Although you see about 14 variances in your packet, a very significant portion of those variances are due to the fact that the village does not currently have a townhome ordinance, and so we fall under a single-family residential lot ordinance, which has side yards, rear yards, front yard setbacks, and other requirements, all of which require variations. In discussions with staff, we're hoping that where you have single-family attached residences, that perhaps this could be taken up at either at the Plan Commission or some other initiative to create such a zoning category. The good news is that there are no height, density, or parking variances required. Many of you are familiar with the prior petitions. This building is, I believe, at the highest point 43 feet high, as opposed to the 60-foot maximum height limitation. The required parking are 24 spaces, or 1.5 per unit. We are providing 40. Each car will have a 2-car garage, plus there will be 8 outdoor guest parking places. And as you can see, tandem parking will be within each garage as a standard feature, but should a homeowner not want the tandem spot, it can be converted to living space. So the 40 spots are without any of the additional tandem parking. If you were to add that to each unit, it'd be 56 parking spaces. So this is very well parked, and we should not have any issues with guest parking, deliveries, or anything else. Of course, you just heard about Taylor Morrison, who is a phenomenal national developer who would be looking to commence construction of this project as quickly as possible, hopefully this year, and that is why we are in for final approval tonight, not preliminary. And finally, our compliments to the staff for working diligently, quickly with us on this to bring us to where we are this evening. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to our architects to go through the site plan and the project with you. Thanks.
Thank you.
I'm Mark Hopkins with HCAM Architects, 43 South Vale Avenue. This is a 4-story townhome project. There's 6 units that face Chestnut, 5 units that face Sigwalt, and 5 units that face Highland. So we've got front architecture all the way around, and all the cars are concealed within the center of the site. We even modified the end units that you see on Chestnut and Highland to extend those buildings to close off the gap that would have occurred if we used the standard inboard unit and repeated that, so that we get our continuous architecture facade of brick and windows instead of the gap looking into the parking area. But we did hold those buildings 5 feet apart there on Sigwalt so that we could get pedestrians and the users of the guest parking flowing through the site, so that if there's guest parks in there, they can walk around and get to the front door of the units, because the front doors of the units all face the street. Each individual unit, you can see, is served by a sidewalk, and then there are the sidewalks between those portals. In addition, there's a sidewalk at the northwest or upper left corner of the site that gets pedestrians out to Chestnut, and then the service drive over there on the right, which is just at the corner of the municipal deck, is also a way to access the site for vehicles and for pedestrians. So what you see in this diagram, besides the landscape illustrating the yards and the sidewalks leading the front door, is the roof plan. So when you see the buildings here, the white portion of the roof is 4 stories, and that's that 43-foot height that Mike was talking about. But the light tan area, that's the remainder of the roof plan, is 3 stories, with 2 slight exceptions, and that would be at those garages that were pulled out, so to speak, to block the view. That's at 2 stories. So that texture there, that tan texture, those are roof decks, and those are accessible from the inside of the units. The parapets, as they would be viewed from the streets, would be 3 stories then, and approximately 34 feet as opposed to the 43 feet. That would be the height of the 4-story portion of the building. We'll show you how the units work. The other thing that you see on this site plan, you can barely see it, there's a change in texture in the parking court. I don't know if you can see it in your exhibits, but in the center of the parking court there where those cars are, and those are the 2-car garages that face onto that, those are permeable pavers. And that's a green feature that allows us to reduce underground detention, but also provide detention there in the area below. And it turns a pervious parking lot into, or impervious into pervious. So that's one of our major green features on the project. This is the building block of the buildings. This is one 4-story inboard unit, if you will. And what Mike was describing over there on the left on the first floor is the standard first floor. And that is, there's 2 cars side by side. You can see at the top of the sheet, it says garage. Well, that's a 2-car overhead door. So the standard is 2 cars there, and then the 3rd car is a tandem. There's an optional build out for the first floor. That 3rd car, tandem car, can be deleted, and then there are a number of things that can be built there. An office, a bedroom, bathroom, that sort of thing, a family room type of bonus space, if you will. On the 2nd floor is the main living space. That's a living room, dining room, kitchen, and breakfast room. There's an optional balcony off at the back, and you can see how the stair works its way up. The 3rd floor is the sleeping floor. We have a 3-bedroom standard. There's a dual master option as well. And then there's upgrades that are possible for the bathrooms. On the last floor, that's how the 3-4-story thing works. So towards the front of the sheet down there, towards where it says 4th floor, that's the roof deck, and that would be the street side of the building. And then there's a 4th-story space that gives out onto it with sliders there. And you can see that's where we're concealing our AC condensers. So those are out of sight. So this is what it looks like. This is indicating then the view from Sigwalt and Chestnut looking back towards, you can see Metropolis Place and Dunton Tower and 200 Campbell, et cetera. And then the landscaping, the front doors of each and every unit, use of decorative box bays. We had long discussions with the Design Commission and with staff about the style of the building. And if we want to call it anything, we would call it transitional, which is kind of sharp and urbane. It's not, literally historical, and then it's not brutally modern. It is transitional in nature. So, but it's highly detailed. There's a lot of, as we would approach the building, you would see a lot of detail work in the box bays, the trim of the windows, the panels between the windows, the cornice at the top of the brick wall. We've got a couple of different brick going on, and then different colors of siding. We worked on those colors and proportion of elements with the Design Commission, for instance. And then you can see how the roof decks work. There are panels which are privacy screens in between, and then you can start to see where those air conditioning condensers are being hid. There's nothing that's located mechanically on the 4th floor. So part of the concern of the review of this building was, what was it going to look like from above? Because there are going to be folks that do perceive this building from above. So it was considered by staff and Design Commission from that standpoint as well. So we wanted to hit on a couple of the sustainable features of the building. We had an exhibit that was part of the packet, and I won't go through the whole thing, but there are a couple of major ones that we ought to touch on because it's Taylor Morrison delivers their project with a green ethic. So they're directing their architects to do certain things. And they directed the civil engineer to provide, for instance, the pervious paving. So part of the green characteristic of this site is simply its location, of course, being a TOD. It's walkable. Even though we're overparked on a code basis, the location and the layout and the proximity to services promotes pedestrian use. And it does not incentivize the use of a vehicle. I mentioned the rainwater management. We have dark sky light fixtures. That is, that there's no up component to the exterior light fixtures. The row home layout itself is inherently energy efficient, but also there are upgrades to the energy characteristic of components, windows and insulation of walls and what have you. The majority of the appliances are Energy Star, LED light fixtures, high efficiency HVAC systems. There's construction methodology to reduce waste, panelizing the project, prefabricating structural components, and then recycling the construction debris. There's carbon monoxide monitoring, high efficiency air filters, and then low VOC materials. So with that, that's the end of the architecture presentation.
Segue from the architecture is the Design Commission recommendations. These are the 7 recommendations that came out of Design Commission. All of them make sense except for the one that I've highlighted, number 4 in red. The discussion went, and you can obviously review the minutes, a long discussion about downspouts and where they were and were they prominent or not. And the way that the discussion went is not exactly the way that the recommendation and the vote happened. Downspouts are kind of a requirement on our building, and we don't want to make them internal. That creates a couple building code issues for us, especially because this is not for rent. This is owner occupied. So one of the things that we did and why this is listed as updated is that the larger wall at the corner that you're looking at that doesn't have the front door had 2 downspouts on it. And that was the primary discussion. And so we removed those and replaced those around the office sig wall, around on Chestnut, and on the other side around on Highland. That solves our problem, and we believe it was the intent of the Design Commission to get rid of those on that large wall. We would ask you to acknowledge that and use this updated architectural rendering for your approvals. It lets us build it appropriately, and we think it looks good. That's my only comment on Design Commission. Affordable housing guidelines. Turn over to Mike again.
The developer had first offered a $25,000 a unit fee in lieu for the 10% required, and the staff and no affordable actual units. The provision of an actual affordable unit here would make this project completely undevelopable. As an example, these units will be selling in the, depending on options, $5 to $7, maybe $800,000 range. The highest sale, based on your current guidelines, it could sell for would be about $170,000. That $500,000 plus gap make it financially unfeasible. So in order to comply with the spirit and the letter of the guidelines of the village, the staff recommended and the developer readily agreed to pay the full $75,000 per unit on a 1.6 basis, which is $120,000 at the time that the building permit is issued, and it would be paid in a lump sum. As is stated on the slide, this is the highest per dollar unit equivalent the village has ever received, and it is comparable with the highest fee for one project the village has ever received for many more units than 1.6. So we have worked recognizing the goals and desires of the village for affordable housing. We believe that that $120,000, when added to the existing Housing Commission fund, will go a long way toward other affordable housing projects which could be developed or subsidized within other parts of the village. So we're very proud and happy that, and I'm proud of our developer, that they have stepped up to pay the full recommended fee in lieu. Thank you.
With that, that's the end of the presentation.
All right, thank you. Let me turn it over to the staff, Mr. Perkins.
Thank you. I'll very quickly go through some of the variations that are requested. Everybody's very familiar with the site, so I'll skip over these slides. These are the main group of variations that are requested for the development as a whole, the PUD as a whole, not the individual deed-restricted lots that just follow the footprint of each unit. So the first variation is a variation from the minimum area requirements. The land area and going to halfway along the right-of-way, which is how we handle this, is 1.39 acres. And the minimum code requirement for an R7 is 2 acres. The reason we've supported this in this situation and in past situations is because the long-term plan calls for additional R7 development in and around this site that would then create an area that is larger than the minimum 2 acre requirement. With respect to setbacks on the property, the required 20-foot setback is being provided on Sigwart Street. On Highland, there is a 25-foot required setback. The proposed plan is for a 12-foot setback after the 8-foot dedication of the right-of-way on Highland. Staff supported this, as did the Plan Commission. As everybody's aware, on Highland we have the Vale Avenue garage that goes across the street. So this would be set back beyond that. Also on the east side of Highland is the former AT&T property, which could have commercial up to the sidewalk with no setback. On Chestnut Avenue, the front yard again is a requirement of 25 feet. The proposal is 17 feet after the 8-foot dedication. In comparison, Arlington 425, the Chestnut building was a 12.2-foot setback, and the Campbell building was about a 10-foot setback. So this has a greater setback than the Arlington 425 and is lower in height. And then the last main setback request is also on the Chestnut Avenue side for the north units that would be set back 8 feet from the north property line. when 15 feet is required. That's just in that one unit configuration on the west side of the site. There are spacing requirements between buildings. Our code is set up for a typical townhouse development similar to Lexington Homes up on old Arlington Heights Road, where the buildings are spaced, and we're looking for a minimum spacing of typically 25 feet. In this case, it's a more urban setting. Petitioners explained the reason for the 5-foot separation. They actually could connect the buildings, and they wouldn't need this variation. We feel this is a better plan with that separation. The driveway width is in one area, the driveway where it comes out onto Highland, again to maintain some green space and not encroach on the Sigwalt setback. There's a requirement of 24 feet, and the driveway at that location is proposed to be 21 feet. Then we do not allow tandem spaces without a variation. Each of the units would have a third space in the garage unless the option for that space to be used for an office or something else. So that variation is recommended as well. We have an unusual provision in our code that if you exceed the code for the minimum parking by more than 50%, then that requires a variation. And the reason for that is we don't want sites overparked and taking up more space than is necessary for parking. In this particular situation, given the tandem spaces, the 2 spaces per unit, and the guest parking, that variation would be necessary. And then there are a series of individual variations that are needed on a lot-by-lot basis just because of the way they're being deeded. So I won't go through all of those. So that really is a summary. I think the petition has gone through everything with respect to the proposal, and I'll just be happy to answer any questions that the board may have.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Perkins. Well, I think it's a very interesting and exciting proposal. I'm especially interested in the design of the individual units. I expect that you're intending to sell to very healthy individuals who can walk up 3 flights of stairs up to the 4th floor.
Mm-hmm.
I'm assuming you don't have any elevators in these.
We do not.
Okay. So very interesting concept, and I think it's a high-quality development. I'm looking forward to seeing it come to fruition. I only had one question regarding the third parking spots.
Mm-hmm.
If you were to have everyone choose the option of building that out,
Mm-hmm.
you would potentially lose 16 parking spots from your total of 40. Is that correct? Or
No, we would be at 40. We'd be at 56 if nobody built it out. And
okay,
we'd
you'd be at
40.
56. That would get you down to 40. I
Yes.
see. Okay. Do you have any projections in terms of how many you expect to build that out?
We don't, not on that build out, no.
Okay.
We're rolling out a similar product in Rolling Meadows right now, and we're going to start pre-sailing on that soon, so we should have an indication in the next month or 2.
Okay, thank you. Questions from the board? Trustee Canty.
So I want to be the first on this board to thank you for your affordable housing contributions. When I came onto this board, I was told that we would never get a developer to agree to our guidelines. So I am pleased to see a developer who came in and said it can be done. And thank you to staff for really working with the developer to make this happen. I always prefer units to fee in lieu of, but I also understand the complications of that with this development. I did have a question also about parking, not to belabor parking, but if a homeowner were to decide not to do the build out and then a subsequent homeowner required 3 or 4 spaces, right? If they had that many drivers living in their townhome, would they be able to get a parking space in our municipal garages? I know they are not able to do that in Block 425.
That would be a decision the village could make at that time. We typically allow guest permits or overflow resident permits in the downtown area, but we have restricted in certain developments the number. This actually is not within the B5 district, so we could easily say we're not going to allow it for this development.
Awesome. Thank you, Charles. Thank you.
Trustee Baldino.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for being here tonight. I don't know if anyone recalls, but a couple of years ago when we were talking about this parcel and the previous development plan, this is almost exactly what I was advocating for. So it'd be kind of silly for me to oppose this development. I do have a couple of questions, though. Are we asking for an R7 zoning because that's what the plan calls for, or is that what makes most sense for the PUD?
Trustee Baldino, probably both. The downtown master plan and the comprehensive plan designations call for the R7. To go to an R6, there would be a lot more variations for height and other things of that nature.
That answers my question. Thank you. And I know that in the plans that I reviewed, there was some option for curbside parking on Sigwalt, and it's not currently planned.
Mm-hmm.
That's sort of an option. Is there? What are the conditions where we might put in the curbside parking on Sigwalt?
So we did meet on site with the developer and talked about a number of things, from sidewalks to the overhead Commonwealth Edison lines and other utilities there. And one of our initial rounds of comments was to bury all of those lines. The developer looked into it, and they were saying it was going to be in excess of $500,000 to $1 million to bury all of those lines that provide service to not just this site but the surrounding area. And there are a lot of utilities that run along there. So we've looked at a concept that I just shown here that we provided to Public Works, and they provided it to Commonwealth Edison. This may or may not be feasible. It would require Commonwealth Edison to have to bury those utilities or relocate them. And if the village requests it, they may be required to do it, or they may not. We're waiting to hear that feedback. But we felt it was overly burdensome for the developer of just 16 units to be asked to bury all of those utilities.
Okay, thank you. And it does lead into my other question about the loading zone, because the loading zone would surely be nice, but we don't want to. I don't want to make that an undue burden just for the loading zone. And I do like the abundance of parking, because we always talk about parking and we're always scratching for additional spaces. So the abundance of parking at this site, I think, is great. And I also like the contribution to the affordable housing. That's very much appreciated. So thank you, Mayor.
Okay. Mr. Frisella, do you have anything to add?
Yes. One of the recommendations from the Plan Commission was that should the lines ever be buried and the village requests that Commonwealth Edison do it, we would certainly cooperate that when they reconstruct along Sigwalt after those lines are removed, that if the village wants that as a loading space, we would have no objection to it, and we would put that in the homeowner covenants, that would be an option if that's what the village wanted at that time. So it's just, you can't do what that plan shows with the utility lines there, because there's a pole right in the middle of it.
Right.
Okay, Trustee Schwingbeck.
Thank you, Mayor. Looking at the overhead, and I think I understand this, I just want to be clear on it. That loading short-term pickup drop-off zone on Sigwalt, is that the only spot for move-in and move-out of all these units?
No. So we did check with our engineer that the parking stalls along Highland and along Campbell are long enough that could fit a full-length moving truck in a temporary condition.
Along Campbell?
Chestnut, I'm sorry.
So you'd be moving...
Chestnut and Highland, I apologize. Also, a smaller moving truck can navigate in the interior court of this. And again, this is for sale, so moving in, moving out is hopefully once every 7 years.
Right. Yeah, and I'm a little concerned because Sigwalt, I believe there, I went over and took a quick look to the west of Chestnut. That street, I think, is about 32 feet wide. And then when you cross over Chestnut, on Sigwalt and go all the way down to Arlington Heights Road, I think it goes down to 29 feet. So I just want to make sure there's enough room there on Sigwalt for moving trucks and congestion and.
Well, currently, without expanding into the parkway, something similar to this concept or a variation of it, there really isn't enough width on Sigwalt at this location for a move-in vehicle. Going east on Sigwalt, it's actually a little wider. So in front of the AT&T property, for example, there's on-street parking. So the pavement width is wider at that location. But it narrows at this point as you go west towards Ridge.
Okay, thank you.
Trustee Rosenberg.
Thank you, Mayor. Charles, the loading short-term pickup drop-off, that's the maximum we can get as 60 feet there, or because of the poles, or?
Well, you could do more. There's some ground-mounted AT&T cabinets with fiber optics running underground. So, there's different versions of how this could be laid out. We did get some public input at one of the meetings from the neighbors not wanting to lose that parkway with the trees and things. So we're trying to provide kind of a minimalistic approach, but it's the village's right away, so we could pave as much as we want or as little as we want down the road. But we were trying to just get a minimum 60-foot loading berth. It is right in the middle of the site, which makes sense, but it's exactly where the Commonwealth Edison poles and all the utilities are. So it just depends on what ComEd will or won't do as far as relocating or burial of those utilities.
So what is the length? Is there a length of time that people will be allowed? Like, is it typically 15, 20 minutes or something?
As far as this concept, we haven't got that far as delineating that. We do have some on-street loading in front of Dunton Towers and other places, so we'd probably do something comparable to that. In the meantime, the move-ins, would be, off Highland or off Chestnut for the initial move-ins, and they are for sale products, so there's not a lot of turnover, similar to the row homes on Evergreen, Kitty Corner, across from our building here. There's actually, that's an even tighter site. Move-ins there occur just on Evergreen, just south of Sigwalt.
So is 60 feet sufficient will that handle approximately two trucks, or like two FedEx or UPS trucks?
Definitely 2 FedEx or UPS trucks would easily fit in that, yes.
Okay. In the garage area behind the units, is there going to be allowable parking for cars behind the garages?
Exterior parking?
Yes.
No.
So there's no room?
Only the 8 lots or 8 stalls that you see in the lot.
And how will those be governed as far as guest parking? I mean, will somebody controlling the guest parking per se as opposed to resident parking?
There will be an HOA or condo association. It's only 8 and it's only 16 units. We don't expect there to be passes or stickers.
Okay. And what do you think your target audience will be age-wise?
It's an interesting demographic, actually. We'll be looking at empty nesters and at millennials. Apparently, they want the same thing. So that's going to be our target demographic.
And without an elevator, it'll probably be younger people, I would think, as the mayor referred to. And I think when you talked about the downspout issue, I think maybe one of the reasons that they were looking to internalize those was as far as the flow of the water going out into public sidewalks and things like that.
It was all about design.
Oh, just design.
Yeah, the stormwater part is handled.
Okay.
It was those 2 that were on that wall. They thought the wall was large and that those downspouts were prominent. And so if they would have said move them, I would have been fine, but they said internalize, and that really messes with building code.
So that area where the downspouts come out, is that permeable paver? Is there in there? Or
those
anything?
downspouts come out to the front. The permeable pavers are in the rear.
So it'll just go into the grass area, or?
We can pull up more room. Say again?
There's yard drains that pick
They'll go into the yard drains, which then go into the on-site stormwater system.
Okay, thank you.
Trustee Padovani, then Trustee LaBedz.
Thank you, gentlemen. This is a wonderful project, and we really appreciate you bringing it forward here. My concern is the combination of this project and also just north of it, the 425 project that we're all so very aware of, and the congestion along Sigwald Street there, that already it's a very busy street. And then when you build 425 and you have the Vale Garage and the other 425 garage emptying into Highland, there's a very good, could we bring that back up? Yeah, that one you were just at, the one before. There we are, that one. Thank you. Anyway, I'm concerned about the congestion along Sigwald Street, and I understand that that pole there, right there in the middle of the 60-foot cutout, makes it a problem. Is there an option then of moving the cutout left or the east or west, so we have the cutout without incurring those extra utility expenses, and still have it there for the delivery trucks, so we at least take care of some of that congestion on Sigwald?
That is possible, and that would be kind of a plan B once we hear back from ComEd. If they won't bury or relocate those utilities, then a plan B could be a pickup and drop-off area either side of where those utilities and those cabinet boxes are.
Okay, so either way the board might approve this, then there would be a cutout, maybe in the center, depending on the utilities, maybe off center.
There could be. So right now, the developer is not proposing that. So if that's something the board wants to have the developer do, there probably would need to be some condition added. If it's something, this was something the village was exploring with ComEd to see whether they would, if the village requested, relocate those utilities, and then the village could install this as part of it, one of our future road projects. So that was the approach that we were taking with this particular.
Okay, so what I'm trying to get at, is there a way to do this without incurring the extra cost just by moving the cutout?
Yes, you could definitely do that, yes.
Because that's what I'm most concerned about, is this congestion along Highland that we know we're going to get. I'd hate to see a UPS truck in front of these homes, these beautiful homes, but blocking most of the traffic on Highland.
Yes, there definitely is a couple other options of providing a pickup and drop-off area either side or both sides of where those utilities, not just the pole, but the ground-mounted equipment, you could span either side of that. You would need to, add a condition that the developer, provide that if this concept is not accepted by Commonwealth Edison.
And as I read the Plan Commission recommendations, I think that was the 7th condition, with the parentheses, if required. So they're leaving it up to the board?
I believe the condition just has the, going the wrong way, sorry, has the developer working with the village, but it's not required that the developer implement that.
Okay, the way I'm reading it, the petitioner shall cooperate with implementation of a parking/loading zone on Sigwald if required. So
yes, that doesn't mean that they're required to install it. So if the board wants them to install that, instead of cooperate, it should be the petitioner shall install a parking loading zone on Sigwald as required.
Okay. So that leaves us with, I guess that leaves it in the lap of the board?
If if that's a desire to require that now and have the developer be required to pay and implement that when they construct, this condition needs to be modified.
All right. Mr. Mayor, I'm concerned about the congestion along Sigwald. So if there's some way to do this without burdening the developer by just moving it one east or west along there so not to interfere with the utilities, that would be obviously the ultimate solution.
Well, Mr. Frisell, are you willing to commit to that?
No.
Okay.
But I do have a couple of comments as to why we stated no, but certainly it's Mark's ultimate decision. Could we go back to the slide that Trustee Padovani was looking at, please? Okay, whoops. So if you go to Highland, please, Charles, this is not working very well as a pointer. If you take a look at the bump out at the entrance to this development along Highland, the cars coming down Highland from the north to the south will not be driving along the parking spaces along Highland because of that bump out. They will be forced to be in the actual driving lane. So a truck, a loading truck or a UPS truck pulling in along Highland behind the bump out, or as I say behind, in front of it or to the south of the bump out, will not in any way impede the traffic along Highland. That's number one. Number two is that I recall the traffic study for this project as well as for the Arlington 425 project that said any traffic coming out of this development and specifically out of the large parking garage for Arlington 425, when they get to Sigwalt and Highland Avenue, there will be a four-way stop sign, and a vast majority of all the traffic will be going east. It will not be going west along Sigwalt Street in front of the units where you're proposing where the parking loading zone is shown. So I respectfully beg to differ that there's going to be a tremendous amount of traffic along Sigwalt in front of this development, and I'm relying on the traffic studies, and if you go back and look at the traffic counts that come out of this project, the vast majority go east to Arlington Heights Road, or if they want to go north, they will exit the Highland garage and go north on Highland and then go east on Campbell to get to Arlington Heights Road if they want to go north. Very little traffic will be going west on Sigwalt. I don't have the traffic study numbers in front of me, but we could certainly provide those. So that's I just wanted to make that explanation. No.
Thank you for that. I appreciate it. Going back to Mr. Perkins, then, is that traffic study, does that include both 425 and the Sigwalt 16 projects together?
No, the two studies were separate, I believe. I don't think either of them incorporated the other traffic. Certainly Arlington 425 did not incorporate the traffic from these 16 units.
We do have our traffic engineer who did the studies for both projects.
So is there some way to get an assessment of the combined traffic from both those on Highland or on Sigwalt?
Yes.
What's your name before you start?
Sure. Good evening, William Woodward with KLOA. When we did the traffic study for this, we did take into consideration the Arlington 425 development. This development, the existing traffic volumes bumped up. The existing traffic volumes in the area bumped up by a regional growth factor when we did those projected volumes. So all of that is incorporated into this traffic study that we did for the 16-unit development. The traffic from the development itself is extremely low, with a total of 12 cars in the afternoon, 8 in the morning, and we didn't even make any reductions for people that might use the public transportation in the area or walk or that type of thing. So it's just extremely conservative, and it's low to begin with.
Okay, thank you. My concern then is, do we anticipate delivery trucks along Sigwalt then? FedEx, UPS, Amazon?
It's a public road. I mean, so I mean, there's always a possibility that a UPS truck or a FedEx truck might just stop on the road to make a delivery.
Okay. So what I'm trying to address here is that if you look at the current state of Sigwalt, and then you have the 425 project and yours, with all the traffic, yes, it's going east, but there'll still be more traffic. And then you have one of those trucks stop in the front. They'll take up essentially a lane of Sigwalt. correct?
It would be,
Use the go ahead.
excuse me.
Oh, yeah, sure.
First of all, I believe, and I'm not certain, but the units on Highland will have a Highland address. Units on Chestnut will have a Chestnut address.
Mhm.
There will only be 6 units on Sigwalt. 5 units on Sigwalt. So the likelihood of a delivery truck who has a Highland delivery or a Chestnut delivery parking where they'd have to walk further to get to the unit makes little sense. As to moving trucks, having unfortunately in my youth, working for my dad, I worked on a moving truck. Everybody in a moving van likes to go in through the basement because basements are open, they're easy, or through the garage. So the turning radius to get into the courtyard area for a moving truck, a box van, is more than sufficient to get a moving truck into that area. But as Mark said, move-ins here, you might have 2 or 3 in and out a year because people don't move in and out. But your point about the delivery trucks, Amazon, the FedEx, to single-family residences, don't see a lot of FedEx. We do see Amazon, Prime, all over the place, no matter where you are. But it's 5 units. It's not the big 80-unit apartment building we had been previously considered here. So the traffic study bears out. We think it's a very minimal amount here. We also think that moving the short-term pickup and drop-off to the east would make the project look a little off balance. It wouldn't be in the center. It would not, and by the way, if you move it to the east, it would not be in front of any units. It'd be in front of grass. So I'm not sure if that would serve the purposes that I think you're trying to achieve.
Thank you. Trustee LaBedz.
Thank you. I also had some concerns about the drop-off and so on, but besides what you said now, Mr. Purcell, even in, I don't remember exactly which testimony, maybe it was in Plan Commission, that a truck is, I'm not so concerned about moving vans because I agree that it's not going to be a frequent thing. It's not going to be any different than a moving van on any residential street when somebody's moving in and out. As far as the Amazon deliveries and all that stuff, I agree, they're not going to want to walk any farther than they have to. They're on a schedule, and they have a lot of places to go, so they're going to want to be as close as possible to the unit that they need to go into. I don't know if there would be any opportunity to have them come inside if they are dropping off at a lot of places and dropping them off at the back. That would be something I don't guess the HOA could talk about, but if one, they're just those little white vans all over the place, and they come in and, but if they're going to 8 of the units, maybe that's kind of a, something they could be made aware of, that they could do that. So I guess I'm less worried about it, and I agree about moving that cutout. I wouldn't want it to be off center if we had it. So although, yeah, I think there's a lot of traffic, a lot more traffic than I think sometimes we realize. I don't really see a way to, make a cutout that would actually work. Let me put it that way. I am, in terms of traffic, and it's just really something to consider as we go down the line. This is a small development, but I am worried about the traffic and this is really for staff's, point, at Highland and Sigwalt, and I know we're going to put another stop, make it a 4-way stop, but when the AT&T building, eventually that gets developed, I think that place with that intersection because of the parking garage and so forth. I think we're going to really have to watch that in terms of traffic. I do want to say I'm really glad to see a townhome development here as opposed to the previously proposed from another developer, apartment buildings. I think it's a much more appropriate kind of development for here. One thing I'm also really glad about is I had looked at some, maybe it was for the first design commission or right after, that the color palette was originally a gray, which to me screams the 20 teens, you know, so 20 years from now, everything in gray was built at this time period. I'm really glad that you listened to them, the advice that you were given, and softened the color palette to the creams and the reddish. I think when I saw that rendering as opposed to the, I went, whoa, this is much better. Now, I think Mr. Fursell would know I'm a little more of a traditionalist than for this particular style, but making the change in the color palette made it a lot more acceptable to me. So I'm okay with that, and I thank you for that. I do want to know about the staging of construction. The Highland building is going to be constructed first.
Correct.
So you'll stage on the other portions of the property.
Yes.
Then what's next?
Sigwald.
Then the Sigwald.
We'll be moving down the line. Yep.
So where will you stage when you come to the Chestnut building?
We're working on a cross-access agreement with the property to the north.
Okay.
Because they're not building all buildings at once.
Right. That's true. Okay. Good. I'm just was concerned that it would be.
So are we.
Yeah. Yeah. Because where would you go? And there's houses. There's beautiful single family homes across the street. So I wouldn't want them to be any more disturbed than they need to be for the period of time of construction. So thank you. I'm glad to hear that. I also would agree, and thank you for the willingness to do the $75,000. And I think in terms of as we go forward, I know we're going to be as a board and staff talking about, what happens in the case of for sale properties. But I think what was agreed upon here is the right thing for here. So I'm satisfied with that, and I am all in all quite pleased with the way things turned out. Sometimes I think, if you wait long enough, the right thing comes along. So thank you.
You're welcome.
Trustee Tinaglia.
Thanks, Mayor Hayes. So I'd like to say that I think this project is a very nicely done project. I think it's going to be a real fine addition to what already is a outstanding downtown in so many ways. So having this additional available row home project, nicely designed, it sets itself separate from all others at the price point that you're in. It's a little different.
Yep.
Not much of that down there, right? There's a few here and there, but this is a nice grouping and a nice little campus, and I think it'll fit really well. I'm not worried about the moving trucks at all. You guys have pointed out really clearly, and I think it makes a lot of sense. This will happen 16 times, and then hopefully not another time for 7 more years, right?
That's the idea.
So let's hope that's the way it is. I want to share a story. I was on Euclid driving east from Arlington Heights Road, and all of a sudden the traffic was stopped. And as you know, on Euclid, east of Arlington Heights Road, there's a center lane in some cases, and then there's just one lane each direction. And everybody was stopped. And no one could figure out why. We thought it was an accident. Nope. It wasn't an accident. It was an Amazon guy who just put on the brakes, put on his hazards, and stopped on the eastbound lane in front of a house, and very, very casually.
Your house?
No, it wasn't your house, no.
It's Mary Beth.
Strolled from his van to the front door, and while everybody is, and I'm not kidding you, there were some angry drivers that were in front of me, and he just took his time to get back in the truck and turn off his, and then go. So what I'm concerned with here is a little bit, as Trustee Padovani said, I'm a little worried about the fact that you've got these 5 row homes here on Sigwalt, and there's also, some nice sidewalk patterns that people can walk through and get through. I think it's going to be really tempting, especially at certain times of the day. You made comments that on Highland as well as on Chestnut, there are those parking stalls within the little recessed areas by the the little bump outs.
Mm-hmm.
You're making the assumption that those aren't already taken by a parked car getting their haircut down the street or buying tennis shoes or something like that, or at a restaurant. Parking, I think, is on the street anyway, is somewhat of an essential need, and it's going to get taken up pretty quick. You guys won't use it. Maybe some of your guests will use it occasionally, but the neighborhood around here will use it dramatically. So I would hate to think that we're going to rely on, how many spaces do you show? Is it 1, 2, 3, 4 spaces on the east side?
Oh, I'm sorry.
On Highland? How many spaces are on Highland? 1, 2, 3?
We're at 3, yeah.
How many are going to be on Chestnut?
4, 2 and 2.
So we've got 8, 9, 10, 11 spaces on the street around your entire site that we're hoping that someone's not going to be parked in all 11 of those, so that the Amazon person who drove down Euclid that day and ruined everybody's afternoon doesn't just cold dead stop in the middle of Sigwalt there and do that. So here's my question, and correct me if I'm wrong, because I don't want to put words in your mouth. I thought, Mike, that I heard you say a couple of minutes back that the homeowners association of this development would be willing to put in their covenants that at such time when Commonwealth Edison decides to bury the lines or do some manipulation of those utilities, that you guys would then advocate adding this 60-foot lay-by off of Sigwalt. Did I hear that wrong, or is that accurate?
It's half right.
Okay, what did you say? Tell me again.
I basically said that we would cooperate and allow what is currently going to be grassy landscaped area to become a loading zone.
Who puts that in?
Well, if ComEd removes all of these poles, they're basically going to destroy all that streetscape, because this isn't the only pole. I think there's one more. Is there one
Charles,
more?
do you know where the other poles are along Sigwalt? Is there a diagram that shows how many there are and where they're
We
at?
know there's one on the hard corner, obviously, and I thought there was one between where this one shows and the hard corner.
So the utilities run from the south through the rear lots of the properties south of Sigwalt, and then it comes across to this pole that's right here.
Yes.
And then lines run across to a pole here, and then they run along Chestnut, and then lines run from this pole also over to here.
There's not another pole, Charles, along Sigwalt in front of our development before you get to Chestnut?
It's possible there's one down
Yes.
here. I don't recall off the top of my head.
Yes, I believe that's correct.
And then there are 2 fairly sizable ground-mounted equipment pedestals that are, we believe, AT&T, where they have fiber running along Sigwalt Street. So it will be challenging to get this concept implemented.
Well, the one you have drawn here clearly is going to be really hard to do in any time soon, because we know how fast some of these utilities move, and this isn't happening anytime soon. I don't even know why we're bothering to look at it. What I would like to know is what could really fit there, and the fact that you might be able to get 2 smaller ones. I mean, I don't know if you need 60 feet. Most of these Amazon trucks and UPS trucks are 30-foot box trucks, or smaller, just regular vehicles. Why couldn't we just have a couple of laybys, one closer to that center sidewalk, and another one, the west sidewalk that cuts through the garage, and another one and just have 2 smaller ones?
And you could do that. You could definitely get an area here to the east of all the equipment, ground-mounted equipment on the pole, and then you could get one in this general area as well.
And this is not a make or break thing for me here. This is a conversation, and I from what I think I heard when Trustee Padovani was getting his answers from Charles, was that the way that the conditions are written right now from the Plan Commission, it's not incumbent upon them to have to do this in any way. So we don't have to, we can look at this any way we need to tonight. In my own personal opinion, I just think that there should be some consideration given to the fact that we live in a day and age of pretty massive deliveries. I mean, it's not just buddies coming over for a beer. It's groceries, it's dog food, it's you name it. It's coming in the Amazon car and UPS. So if there's a way to get something here, even if they're two smaller ones, I'd be thrilled with that. That's all.
So, two answers in response to that. One, the reason staff was going to take the lead on this is because Taylor Morrison wants the parkway. And so we wanted to keep it where it's at, put the trees in, make it green, have a great
Do you know how wide that parkway is from the sidewalk right now to the curb, the back of curb? How wide is that grass area?
Wide.
It's a little bit greater than 8 feet.
Yeah.
We did an 8-foot pull bar.
You're going to need to come up to the microphone.
Yeah, I'm remembering from the previous submittal, but there was room for a lay-by parking space and about 2 feet of pavers between that and this edge of the sidewalk.
So a lay-by space being 9 feet, so you maybe got 10 or 11?
7.5 or 8, so you might have 9.5 feet
Okay.
to the sidewalk.
So wherever that is, you would not be able to have any greenery between the sidewalk and that lay-by, which makes sense because you're going to get out of your car, you want to step on a sidewalk, and that's fine for that section there. But Taylor Morrison doesn't, I mean, you want to have the greenery facing the street there. It's a buffer to this traffic.
We want that presented.
I understand.
We, in the condition, and as we worked with staff, we will cooperate. We'll put it in our declaration that if staff takes the lead and does this over the next 1, 2, 3 years and gets it accommodated, we won't object.
But by that time, you're sold out and you're done, so you don't care.
But I've laid the groundwork. So
No,
that
I guess my
HOA
point is, you're in the beginning here, having the greenery there is a nice buffer to the busy street, to the sale of the units like that.
Yeah.
And I can imagine.
Once I
that's-
sell them, doesn't mean I go away.
No, I understand, but.
It's a Taylor Morrison product.
Sure,
and we're
but
gonna
if the
be-
village requires this kind of thing to happen by virtue of this board tonight or by staff later on, it's no skin off of your reputation for that.
Sure, which is why we're laying the groundwork in the declaration that they won't object.
Okay.
The second answer is that your cross-section on Sigwalt in front of this development is wide enough to accommodate a car pulled over temporarily and still get 2 means of traffic. It's not 2 full lanes and stripe it, don't do that, but you can still drive around that. It's not the Euclid scenario that you just discussed.
Yeah.
And for a 14-second, should be Amazon delivery.
Yeah, okay.
That's perfectly adequate.
I don't want to belabor the point. I've said what I need to say. I'm not voting against this project because of this. I'm voting against it I'm kidding. I'm going to vote in favor of this project.
Wouldn't have been the first bait and switch I got.
Just think this would be a nice added piece to the puzzle, and we'll see what others have to say. That's it.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
I'm done. Thank you.
Trustee Scaletta.
Thank you, Mayor. So, Charles, do you concur with the petitioner's characterization of the Design Commission regarding the downspouts?
I think they were looking for all the downspouts on the Sigwalt frontage to be internalized. I think that's how I interpreted their condition. I wasn't at the meeting, but reading through the minutes, that was kind of what I got out of it.
Any chance you talked to the staff that was at the meeting?
The staff that was at the meeting is not in the office right now, so I wasn't able to have that conversation. When I got the presentation before we loaded it up today, that they were wanting to seek some relief from that, so I went through the minutes, but I wasn't able to talk to the staff member because he's not in right now.
Okay. You answered my questions regarding construction phasing already. Charles, are all the buildings sprinkled?
I think code requires that they be sprinkled in a townhouse development, yes.
I would think so, but I'm just, now that we're putting them 5 feet apart, be a good question to ask, right?
Does Mark, the architect, do you agree with that?
Want to make sure we're all.
There.
Okay. Thank you for your agreement on the affordable housing funding. The tandem parking spaces, Charles, if you remove the tandem space from all the units, we're reducing it 16 units, right? Or 16 spaces?
Correct.
Okay, and then they wouldn't need the variation still?
They would still need a variation.
It'd be over 50%?
They would be over 50% more than minimum code. Minimum code is 24.
Okay.
And even removing the tandem spaces, they would be at 40.
Okay. And for the petitioner, how many bedrooms are in each unit?
3. There's options for 2. There's options for 4. There's options for 5. But 3 is the standard.
So what's the square footage of?
That I'm going to defer.
2,400 to 2,700 square feet, depending upon that first floor. I'm sorry.
It's
Yeah,
all right.
trustee school. There's 23, let's say 2,300 square feet that varies up to 2,750, depending upon that first floor build out. And we have 2 size footprints. So there's variance in footage in that range. Does that make sense? 23 to 2,750.
Okay, for all 4 floors or 3.5 floors, however you want to refer to it. And does that include the tandem spot?
No, that doesn't include the garage space.
So you're just
and
giving
it
me
doesn't include the roof deck. That is heated and cooled interior space, if you will.
Livable space.
Yeah.
Okay. The tandem parking space, though, could become livable space, right?
Right, and that's why the square footage can vary depending upon the sales program as it goes along.
Okay. You were the architect on the previous building, correct?
Mm-hmm.
And how many parking spaces did you have on Sigwalt at that time? 7. Plus a loading zone.
6 or 7?
7. I have it pulled up.
Okay, there you go.
So does this come down to cost? I mean, because I don't understand, when Trustee Tinaglia even suggested, maybe you put them like on each side, so it's not right in the middle of the townhomes. What's the objection?
As I said, we want the parkway. We want the trees. We want the greenery. Also, you were talking about an 80-unit apartment building. This is 16 for-sale row homes.
I'm not comparing the 2 units. I'm asking the question of why you wouldn't.
Well,
I understand the greenery in front of the actual townhomes, but when you look at the right and you look at the left, there's still green space there.
The amount of utilities that are there make it cost prohibitive for us to tackle that. With a higher unit property or development, like as the one before, they could theoretically afford to do that and spread it across those units. At only 16, we can't absorb the cost on that utility stuff.
Okay. So I'm looking at the plan from prior, and it shows all the existing utilities. So what utilities would have to be moved to add 4 parking spaces, 2 on the left and 2 on the right?
ComEd, WOW, AT&T.
Those all have to be moved.
They're all in front of us. Half of the village of Arlington Heights is on that pole, and it's.
I understand, but that pole was staying, and it's still
That pole
staying.
then goes underground to multiple transformers along Sigwald. Plus, you have fiber. AT&T has fiber. It's a mess. It's a spaghetti mess of utilities in there.
That's why it's a challenging property. Okay.
Yes, it is.
Explain to me the turning into the courtyard. So it's left turn in, right turn out?
No, it's a full intersection.
Is it a full intersection?
Mhm.
Okay, because I'm looking at the rounded area, and it makes it look a little.
Yeah, and there's also a line on that aerial from the current parking, which makes it look split too.
Okay.
That's just on the aerial. That's not on the engineering.
Okay. And with all due respect, Mr. Fursell, I don't see anybody moving in a box truck that could fit through there. I mean, when you're talking about a space, a unit that's 2,500 square feet,
Part of the traffic study did show the garbage trucks could all get in, make 3-point turns and leave, that the a fire truck could, not the largest hook and ladder, but the next largest one could get in and be able to get out of this area. And it depends on the length of a box truck that would or would not be able to go in there. It is 20, the throat entrance, the way you measure is perpendicular. If you were to measure at the same angle that you measure at the same angle, but when you come in from the south and turn in, there's plenty room for a large truck to turn in and then turn into the courtyard, go in, and we have the diagrams from the traffic study.
If you say a large truck can fit through and your team agrees, then I'll accept that. But box truck to me is not a large truck. You know, box truck is usually a smaller vehicle. So we can get a large truck. I'm not saying a semi, but I'm saying a large truck would be able to
Semi
fit
would
there.
not fit.
Agreed. I think we all agree to that.
Turning
There's-
radius.
This is the exhibit that was presented to the Plan Commission. They
Mhm.
went through it with us.
And then there's the smaller truck.
That's the smaller truck, that's the larger truck.
That's the large fire engine.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sure.
So I guess that just really leaves us, with Charles, with the downspouts. So you're suggesting that the downspouts are now hidden, but they're not necessarily internalized, correct?
Correct. As you can see, they're not on the large wall facing Sigwald at the corner, which is what the primary discussion was about.
Okay, and
So we acknowledged that and removed it.
So where are they?
The top left, you'll see that is tucked into the corner on a recess.
Okay.
That is the same on the other side.
That goes into the ground?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yep, and then into our on-site stormwater retention.
great. So I see the one on the, and then there's one further on the left, right, too, Charles?
Right there, and then at the garage.
Okay.
Yeah, one here.
And then
There's one over here, and looks like one here.
Yeah, and those, the
I don't know
Sigwald
if there's any
buildings,
others there, one there.
that wasn't the discussion. That is what they were focusing on, and that's why we have a compromise solution, which we're presenting today, is that they were concerned about the wall that was the most blank, as they were referring to it as, that had those downspouts as prominent, which is where we moved them off of. Half of the commission actually liked the downspouts facing Sigwald on the units facing Sigwald, so we did not move those.
Okay.
But this, we can actually build, all downspouts are exterior, but they are removed from the most offensive location from a design commission's perspective.
Great. I have no further questions.
Okay, one more question from Trustee LaBedz.
Thank you. I forgot to ask this. Actually, I think it's really more for Charles. And it's a sidewalk question. If a homeowner at the townhomes were to go tour, like goes to the train station, for example, comes out the back and turns left to go north on Highland, is it my recollection that there's not really a sidewalk after you get past this development and you get to the parking garage? Is that correct? I mean,
So-
that isn't cut out by the ingress and egress for the cars in the parking garage.
So correct, on the east side of Highland, staff had requested a 6-foot brick paver sidewalk. Plan Commission recommended a 5-foot brick paver sidewalk, but it does terminate when it comes to the garage, because the garage is built over the right-of-way. So anyone going north would have to cross the street and go through the sidewalk inside the garage on the east side of Highland to go north.
Okay. And because the 425 building, the Highland building, will abut the,
It will abut the
garage.
parking garage, and,
Okay.
and there's no sidewalk in that area. There's parking, perpendicular parking off
Right.
Highland at that location.
right, Right. Okay, I just wanted to clarify that in terms of safety for a pedestrian. Not necessarily the safest place to walk, but it's
Okay.
semi.
correct.
So,
Trustee
thank you.
Baldino.
Well, if the board is interested, I have a definitive answer on the above-ground utilities on Sigwalt there, but if the board is satisfied, then I don't need to.
Go ahead and
Go
give
ahead.
us. go
Okay.
ahead.
So I'm looking at the satellite image, and back on the original map where you had your little circle in the loading zone,
That was Charles' map, yep.
there's an above-ground pole and a utility box located there. There's another above-ground pole on the western side of Sigwalt, and there's an above-ground utility box in the middle, in between those two poles. From that point on, there's nothing to the east side. The utility lines run north.
Okay, anything further from the board? I've got one blue card, Peg Lane. Peg?
Thanks, President Hayes. I have to say I have a little rain for this parade because I think that the word creativity was mentioned, but I think without any units with elevators, that excludes anyone who uses a wheelchair, like my brother, and I have to decide whenever I'm invited somewhere and he might be coming with me, do I want to support that kind of place or go there and cooperate with that so that he's excluded? I also think that the board could begin a whole new era of taking care of all citizens, having options by requiring that there not be a payment in lieu. First of all, the payment in lieu here is at the low end of the area range. They go up to $175,000, and so $75,000 is not a high payment for in lieu of an actual livable unit. The creativity could be expanded to have a one unit separated into several apartments, like is done with townhomes in the city all the time, to provide for some smaller, more affordable units. It seems that also we are allowing too much developers to make determinations that the board might think otherwise about, to take care of the range of residents, the people who are not, do not have cars, need to be near the train to get to jobs, and couldn't, and need an affordable unit. As we've mentioned before, and poverty has moved to the suburbs all over the country. It doesn't look at first like that's the case, but that is the case, that there is a need for affordable housing in suburbs now. I think I've covered everything. Yeah, that's it.
Okay,
Thank you.
Is there anyone else in the audience who wishes to address the board on this agenda item? Seeing none, back to the board for a motion, hopefully.
I'd like to move that the board accept the Planning Commission's recommendation on the Sigwald 16 project. Just with one concern on my part in terms of the congestion on Highland, or on Sigwald, but still, I'm very, very supportive of it.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Motion by Trustee Padovani, seconded by Trustee Schwingbeck. Any further discussion? All right, Trustee Scaletta.
Charles, can you pull up the list of conditions? I just want to make sure that I'm clear. What are we doing about the downspouts? Are we
The downspouts are part of the Design Commission motion.
right?
So if you are comfortable with what they showed you tonight in terms of downspout location, then what we would do is, on the condition that on number 9, substantial compliance with the Design Commission recommendation, I would say with condition 4 eliminated, which is the one that relates to the downspouts.
Okay, I just want to make sure
Understand
we're
that?
clear. I'm clear what we're voting on.
Right, right, right.
If that's the will of the board
I
to
agree.
not to accept what they showed today instead of what the design commission had moved, then we would just modify that condition to eliminate the design commission's condition number 4.
All right, is the motion maker okay with that?
Yes, I am.
All right, and the seconder?
Okay with it.
Okay. So let's restate the motion then. Well, let's restate the motion.
I'd like to respectfully make the motion that the village board accept the planning commission recommendations with that one design change for the downspouts for the Sigwald 16 project.
Okay.
Second.
Seconded by Trustee Schwingbeck. All right, further questions or comments from the board? All right, we've got a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, thank you. Good luck, and hopefully we'll have good weather for construction and no problem. So congratulations.
Thank you very much.
We have one other item on the new business, and that's Raising Cane's, 225 East Palatine Road, a PUD amendment, and for a restaurant and drive-through. So I apologize for the delay. Thank you for your patience. And just introduce yourself for the record, if you would.
Good evening, members of the board. My name is Joseph Bibat, B-I-B-A-T. Sorry, Joe. That's okay. And I'm a rep of the Town and Country Chicago Associates. And we're here tonight seeking approval for the PUD amendment and a special use permit for a restaurant and drive-through. Over the past few months, we've been working diligently with I, along with our tenant and engineers, have been working diligently with the village planning and engineering departments to gain approval of the design for the new freestanding Raising Cane's tenant. I believe we have met most, if not all, of those requirements. We've gotten positive feedback from both the design commission and the planning departments. As you may know, the building will be located in an empty area between the existing Harris Bank and the Verizon store along Palatine Road in an underutilized portion of the site. Today, Jeff Putney is with me from ADA Architects and Jason from Kimley Horn. I think Jeff has a presentation for us.
Thank you. Jeff Poutney, ADA Architects. Just give a brief history, if anyone who doesn't know what Raising Cane's is. This was first envisioned by its founder, Todd Graves. When he was in college, he wrote a business plan for the concept. When he gave it to his professor, he was actually given a failing grade because his professor said that basically you can't have a restaurant just serving chicken fingers. Todd disagreed and went to work to raise money for his restaurant. And the oil fields in California, the salmon fishing in Alaska, came back, got a small business license, and constructed his first building in 1996. And since then, there's approximately 430 stores, both nationally and internationally, over in Saudi Arabia and Kuwait. The store is not your typical chain restaurant. It's part of the community, as noted by on the mural painted outside of the building, which will have the name of the city, Arlington Heights. They give back to the community with seminars for animal welfare, helping young students develop their business plans for themselves. So again, they provide jobs for younger people. So again, they try to give back to the community as much as possible.
Anything further from the?
No, we're just here to answer any questions you might have.
Okay, Mr. Perkins?
Yes, thank you. This is coming before you from the Plan Commission. It's an amendment to the Plan Unit Development and a special use for a restaurant with a drive-through. It is located at Town and Country Shopping Centres, highlighted here on this slide. This particular area of the centre has never, to my knowledge, had any parking in it. The centre does have a surplus of parking from the days when there were movie theatres at this location. So it's a great opportunity to build out an additional outlet and give some additional energy to Town and Country Shopping Centre. The plan is very clean and neat. It handles all of its own parking on the outlet as well as having shared parking. There's about a 300 space surplus for the entire shopping centre. There's sufficient stacking for the drive-through. There would be 2 small outdoor dining areas that are highlighted in the red towards Palatine Road. But it's a nicely landscaped, very clean site plan, and staff and Plan Commission would recommend approval.
All right, thanks, Charles. Well, I did read a lot about the story of Raising Cane's on your website, and so I think it's a great success story, and we're very happy that you've chosen Arlington Heights as your next location, and so I think it's a real plus for our community to have a new fast food restaurant in. It is considered a fast food restaurant, right? Quick service. We're very happy to have you one way or the other, and so thank you. My only question was on the mural and whether or not that's considered a sign and if we're going to have any issues with that.
So any of the signage that's shown on the plans, they would need to come back and petition and have that petition for any sign variations heard before the Design Commission and then come back to the Village Board. And that was outlined in our report. The petitioner is aware of that. Design Commission did have some comments on a couple of the sign components, as did staff, and we'll work with the petitioner on coming up with a plan that makes sense.
Okay, thank you. You understand the sign is not part of this approval?
Yes, we were aware of that when we went through planning and design, that would be a separate submittal for the variances, specifically for the mural.
Okay, thanks. Trustee Tinaglia.
Thanks, Mayor Hayes. Well, can you tell me where the nearest one of these restaurants is here?
I believe there's one in Harwood Heights and by Loyola University in Chicago.
That's it?
Naperville.
So
Naperville.
what made you choose Arlington Heights? I'm just really curious.
I think that was based off of the company real estate when they do developments in the communities of where they feel it would be beneficial, obviously for them and for the community, where there's basically a vacancy for this type of restaurant.
And there are some other, very nicely done businesses like this in the chicken side of things, and there are some limitations on hours. What are your hours of operation going to be?
Typically for this one, it would be that Sunday through Thursday would be 10 to 12, and then Friday through Saturday would be 10 to 2.
2 a.m.
2 a.m., yes.
Late night drive-through.
Yes.
Okay. Will the dining area be open that late too, or just a drive-through area?
I believe everything would be open.
Really? Interesting.
Again, the patio, even though we have people out there, we do have music, but it's very low. It's not an area that people are going to be sitting at 2 o'clock in the morning. We don't have Wi-Fi. It's not like a Starbucks where people are just hanging out all the time.
Right. I'm not terribly concerned with that. I'm just more curious than anything else. I can't tell you how happy I am that you guys are here doing this. I think this is awesome. I'm thankful that you're willing to invest in Arlington Heights to do this with us, and to have something special like this is, I think, great.
I'm glad to be here.
So when it comes time to do your second round of approvals for your signage and things, I'm going to encourage you to be as creative, to be as artistic, and to be as determined as possible. I mean, I appreciate that part of the whole puzzle, and I think you need to have good signage. I want you to be successful. I want you to have what you need. I would suggest don't go get carried away asking for things you don't need. Mm-hmm. But when it comes to this storyboard and this mural that you're going to do, I'm 100% in favor of that, just as long as it's tasteful and it's done properly. So you're going to have my support as long as it's creative and sharp and necessary and so on.
Great, thank you.
Everything else about it is great, and I'm prepared to make a motion as soon as everybody else is ready.
Trustee LaBedz.
Thank you. This is a really intriguing concept, and I'm looking forward to it coming. And one thing also that I appreciate with your your willingness to locate here is it's also going to help the shopping center, not just in terms of driving traffic, but it'll look a lot nicer in that location because it's just a parking lot with so shrubbery nearby. So I do appreciate what you're doing, and thanks for choosing Arlington Heights.
Right.
Trustee Canty.
I am a huge fan of Raising Cane's, have been since I first discovered you when I lived in Las Vegas, and I have been waiting a long time for you guys to come to Arlington Heights because I do.
Do you want to make the motion?
I do, and in fact, I was going to say
I'm going to
that
let you do it.
I'm going to go ahead, and I am going to move that we accept the recommendation of the Planning Commission to amend the Planned Unit Development Ordinance number 74-49 and number 01-026 and the special use permit for a restaurant with a drive-through before Trustee Tinaglia can get there.
I get to second it then.
All right. Motion by Trustee Canty, but it probably won't get you any free food.
No, and it doesn't have to. I'm willing to pay for it. It's that good.
And seconded by Trustee Tinaglia. And further questions by Trustee Rosenberg.
So again, I would also like to thank you, and that shopping center does need a uplifting, and maybe you can help it along. And from what I understand, the only thing you serve is basically chicken and sides, correct?
There's basically 4. There's chicken fingers, French fries, coleslaw, and Texas toast, along with the fresh-made lemonade and iced tea that's made in the kitchen every day, fresh.
Okay. But chicken is the primary meal?
Yes.
Okay. Well, thank you. I look forward to it.
Anything further? Anything further? Anything from the audience on this? Seeing none, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Congratulations. Welcome to Arlington Heights.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Right, there is no other new business, so we move on then to the report of the village manager and back to the substantial amendments
You're on the board.
to 2015-2019 consolidated plan and draft 2019 annual action plan. And the motion is to
It's recommended that the village board approve the substantial amendments to the 2015 to 2019 consolidated plan and the 2019 annual action plan, including any amendments that are made as a result of the discussion during the second public hearing.
So moved.
by Trustee Scaletta, seconded by Trustee Baldino. Any further questions or comments from the board? Anything from the audience? Do we need a roll call?
Roll call on this one.
Roll call.
Trustee Scaletta,
Yes.
Trustee Baldino,
Yes.
Trustee Padovani,
Yes.
Trustee LaBedz,
Yes.
Trustee Tinaglia,
Yes.
Trustee Rosenberg,
Yes.
Trustee Schwingbeck,
Yes.
Trustee Canty,
Yes.
President Hayes.
Yes. Anything further, Mr. Recklaus?
Nothing further this evening.
Okay. Anything from the board under petitions and communications? Seeing none, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
By Trustee LaBedz, seconded by Trustee Scaletta. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Thank you for joining us this evening.
3 hours.